the bed and wave to my homegirls. Hey, Barbie. Hey. Why so
Barbie.
stressed? Could it be those irrepressible thoughts of death? Come on, we got important things to. Ooh, it's her and her and me and you and pain. Goes a bad. Ooh, that's cold. Beautiful from head to toe. I'm ready to go. You know, it's me. It's gonna be alright. Good enough to drink. We like other colors, but pink just looks so good on us. P, panic. I'm scared. N, nauseous. K, death. That's my Barbie. Go Barbie, go Barbie. That's my Barbie. Oh, girl, you okay?
Hi, Barbie. I'm fine. A-okay.
So the Barbie movie. Who's seen the Barbie movie? Most of us in the room. It's a good movie. It's a funny movie. I really enjoyed it. I encourage you to go home this week and actually, no, it's your homework this week. To go home and watch the Barbie movie. It's really, really, really good. But for those of us who haven't seen it, the Barbie movie follows stereotypical Barbie around who lives in Barbie Land. She lives this seemingly perfect life along other Barbies and Kens in Barbie Land. It's a world ruled by all the Barbies. They hold the most prestigious jobs. They're lawyers, doctors, teachers, professors, politicians. And then the Kens mostly hang out on the beach, and beaching is their profession. And one night, Barbie, at a Barbie dance party, starts to think about getting old, starts to think about death and dying, and she starts to stress out and having these dark and depressive thoughts. And the next day, she wakes up, and we see what happens when she wakes up. She has bad breath, she has cellulite, the shower is cold, her waffle is burnt, her milk has expired. And this sends Barbie into an existential crisis, questioning everything that she knows, everything that she believes, but all she wants is life to go back to normal. And so Barbie and Ken, they venture into the real world to fix the problem, and then chaos ensues. So hello, welcome to Refuge. If this is your first time visiting Refuge, you are probably weirded out and wondering why a woman is preaching about Barbie. If you are a regular attender, you see me up here preaching about Barbie, and you're like, yeah, that tracks. That's pretty on brand for Nicole. And so you're probably wondering why I'm preaching on Barbie tonight. Well, Brian had this really cool idea for the teaching team to take on series of their own. He did a series of their own. He did a great 2-part Losing My Religion series. If you haven't listened to it, go back and do it. If you have, go back for a rewatch or a re-listen. It's really good. So he did that, and that was his favorite band and favorite song, so he got to do that. David did his 2-week series and brought us some really deep spiritual insight from his favorite movie, The Lion King. And so then it was my turn. And look, if I'm being honest, between getting married and going on a honeymoon, I was really not thinking about this. I was for sure, but it was in the back of my mind, like, what am I going to do a series on? And I had some ideas, I had some things I wanted to do, and it was actually on my honeymoon that my wife and I, she's my wife now, woohoo! Now, my wife and I, we had the Barbie movie on. I think it was on in the background while we were getting ready for dinner one night, and I started rewatching the Barbie movie, and I was like drawn in, and I was like, man, there are some really powerful spiritual parallels in the Barbie movie. And I don't know if it's the children's and youth pastor that's in me that's always looking for a good sermon illustration in a TV book or a movie, but the creative juices just started to flow. I was ready to work with it. I was like, Barbie series, and so I emailed Brian, and he was like, I don't know, and so that kind of took the wind out of my sails, but I was like, I'm going to do it anyways. So that leads us here tonight. So I don't know what you've heard about the Barbie movie. If you haven't seen it, there's a lot of mixed reviews. People either love it or they hate it. People say it's propaganda. It's hiding woke messages throughout the whole movie. It's got feminist politics. It's meant to brainwash women and mothers and young girls. And that's if you believe everything Ben Shapiro says. But yes, and you can find those messages in the Barbie movie. If you're looking for them, you can take that away from the Barbie movie. But it's just like that you can justify slavery and racism with scripture if you want to. If that's what you're looking to justify, you can find that truth in the Bible. But what I really took away from the Barbie movie, what we're going with tonight is that, or for the next few weeks, is that the Barbie movie, it holds up a mirror to show how a held belief, a way of thinking, of doing something because this is the way we've always done it, can actually be damaging to all people. Brian walked us through losing our religion and talked about how Jesus dismantled and denounced and was bucking religion through his life on earth. And what Jesus did was he held up a mirror to the hypocrites wanting to stone a woman caught in adultery. And instead, he said, if you have not sinned, you throw the first stone. And Jesus was holding up a mirror, forcing them into a self-reflection. And then when Jesus got down in the dirt, he didn't condemn this woman, but he offered her boundless grace. Jesus flipped the tables because he was angry at the misuse of God. He was angry at what people were doing in the temple. And that was a metaphor for how we need to overturn our own understandings, our own misconceptions and prejudices, and our complacency. He had a quote from the second week of his mini-series that really stood out to me. He said, "No one else seemed bothered that God's church had turned into a marketplace except for Jesus." And we're not Jesus, not even in the ballpark, but there is something that we alone have a unique insight to, something that should make us really angry. And it's not the sins of other people, but it's our own sin. And the damage it causes, our apathy, our unholy laziness, our complacency, our pride, our indulgence, our image management, our people-pleasing, and our cowardice. And all of that brings me to my point that losing our religion, deconstruction, reconstruction, questioning, renovating, reassessing, re-examining, exploration, and restoration. I panicked because I forgot how to pronounce that word. Analysis. The point is that these things, whatever you want to call it, tonight I'm going to use the term deconstruction. I don't know if you have an issue with that word. If you don't like that word, I'm sorry, but for simplicity's sake, and so I don't have to keep apologizing for using a word you don't like, I'm just going to use the word deconstruction. But anytime I say it, you can substitute any of those in for it. But it is a never-ending process. It's not a one and done, but it is a lifelong journey, continual growth, continual learning, continuing to reevaluate our faith, our belief systems, the way we think, the way we live, the way we give of our time, talent, and resources, the way we think, the way we treat people, reassessing how we exist in the world. And so when I watch the Barbie movie, it's not the dismantling of the patriarchy that I want to preach, although I could. It's the underlying theme that we as people, we as Christians, we as believers and followers of Jesus are never done becoming. We are never done becoming the person God wants us to be. And I've been challenged recently in this. And you know, I grew up kind of living in this Barbie Land utopia. Like I believed all the correct things. I said all the correct things. I did all the correct things, or so I thought. And as I grew to know God, things about who I was and what I knew about God, they stopped making sense. And so I started to ask questions. I started to deconstruct. I started to reevaluate my faith. And so that I ended up coming out of the closet. I ended up moving back home to Florida and finding refuge and starting to minister again and lead worship. And then slowly but surely my beliefs, became correct again. I thought the right things. I believed the right things. I taught the right things. I'm a pastor at an affirming church. I got married right here in this spot. I vote for pro-LGBTQ candidates. I got my church involved in Naples Pride. I support the Human Rights Campaign, and I had fallen back into the lie that I had it all figured out. I had done the work, I had deconstructed, I had found the correct beliefs, and I was trying to bring Jesus to the LGBTQ community, which is not inherently bad, but I got tunnel vision. I got tunnel vision, and I forgot that I'm never done becoming the person that God wants me to be. Refuge is not done becoming the church that God wants it to be in Southwest Florida. Refuge is not done becoming a safe place for all people. That's gay, straight, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, refugee, immigrant, addict, veteran, all people. We still have work to do to be that safe place that God has called Refuge to be. And so let's take a look at what Jesus has to say about some of these things. We're going to go to Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. He said, "Don't misunderstand why I have come. I did not come to abolish the law of Moses or the writings of the prophets. No, I came to accomplish their purpose. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not even the smallest detail of God's law will disappear until its purpose is achieved. But I warn you, unless your righteousness is better than the righteousness of the teachers of the religious laws and of the Pharisees, you will never see the kingdom of heaven." So to hear this is probably a little confusing when we talk about losing our religion and deconstructing and dismantling religious practices that are harmful to people. Jesus hated religion, and he hated the hypocrisy that was excluding people, but yet here he is telling us that unless we're more righteous than the teachers of the law and the Pharisees and the people he keeps calling hypocrites, it's game over for us. And so what sense does that mean with what we've learned about Jesus operating from a place of love and not legalism? And so I tried to think of a way that I could make this make sense for everybody, because this is something that theologians and biblical scholars, they argue. What does it mean when Jesus said he came to fulfill the law and not get rid of it? So one of the best ways that I could come up with to explain it is if I can put it like this. It's like Sheldon Cooper trying to solve why electrons behave as if they have mass when traveling through a graphene sheet, right? Easy, super easy. Any fans of The Big Bang Theory? This is a great show. This is very funny. This is not your homework, but if you got like a casual, 25 minutes, check out The Big Bang Theory. This is one of the funniest episodes. Sheldon Cooper is trying to solve an equation. Like I said, I'm not going to repeat it again because I almost messed it up. But he's trying to figure out how to solve this equation, and he ends up going crazy because he's not seeing what he's missing. And the law before Jesus was like a big whiteboard full of rules and expectations and things to do that really didn't make sense, but man tried to make it make sense. Man tried to figure out what they were doing right, what they were doing wrong, what they were doing to be holy. And up until Jesus, it was simply man trying to make sense of what God had given them. And then we bring Jesus. And he is the answer to the equation. All of the Old Testament, all of the prophecies, all of the laws of Moses, they point us to Jesus. And so Jesus isn't here to throw away the law, throw away what God has given and God has said. He's here to complete it. He's here to give it purpose. He's here to give it meaning. He's here to take all of that equation and give us the answer and the way to live and what it means. Because the law is important, but it's not about a strict adherence to the literal letter of the law, but a continual learning, discovering, and searching out the deep things of God, because following the law isn't enough. There's a higher call and a more profound way to live for those of us who follow Jesus. It's a life of deep searching, deep reflection, deep evaluation, deep exploration, and deep restoration of God's law. To find and live according to the principles of love, justice, and mercy that God intended when he first gave the law. We see Jesus deconstruct. Jesus deconstructs. I feel like he deconstructs his whole ministry on earth. And I'm not going to read this, but if you keep going on in Matthew 5, it's where Jesus says, "You have heard that your ancestors were told that you should not murder, or you will be subject to severe judgment. That's what Jesus said. You have heard it said that if you murder, you will be judged and condemned. But I'm saying to you that even if you are angry, if you curse someone, if you hate someone, if you call them an idiot, if you drive in Southwest Florida and call people idiots, you are subject and in danger of that very same judgment. And this is where I believe Jesus promotes and practices deconstruction. He holds up these two truths together, that it's bad to murder, but it's also bad to hate. And he examines them side by side. Are they the same? Are they different? Do they work together? Does one work with the other? Do we need to get rid of one to make the other one make sense? Does one make the other better? You must not murder. That's pretty easy. I mean, look at all of us not murdering just right now. Just not murdering. I would bet good money that everyone in this room would get to the end of their life and say, I've never killed anybody. I hope that everyone in this room can say that at the end of their life. But none of us, not a person in this room is going to come to the end of their life and say, I never hated, I was never angry, I never held resentment, I was never bitter, I never cursed anyone. Because it's not just about following the law. You're not supposed to murder just because murder's bad, but you're not supposed to hate. You're not supposed to be filled with venom and anger and seek revenge. The you have heard it said is this Barbie Land utopia of easy to follow rules. You do X, Y, and Z and everything will fall into place. The waffle will pop up and the butter will land right on it. If you do everything that you're supposed to do to the letter of the law, black and white, clear distinctions of good and bad, who's in and who's out. No need to seek the motivation behind why we don't murder, why we don't commit adultery, why we don't seek revenge, why we love our enemies. No reason to ask those questions. So Jesus' words are about examination, holding up the law, not just to examine the law, but also to push us into a place of self-reflection. Am I just not murdering because murdering is bad, or am I actually loving people who I don't kill? That was a joke, but whatever. You're either not paying attention or I'm preaching really good and you're just like ready for it. Jesus' words are about exploration, looking beyond mere compliance to the law. A shift from the external of our behavior to the internal and the motivations of our heart. Asking, why does not murdering matter to all people? And then there's a transformation. Jesus' words are about a transformation from the inside that flows out, replacing anger and bitterness and resentment with understanding, empathy, patience, compassion, and love for all people. This is a lifelong journey of getting closer and closer to the example that Jesus lived out for us. Intentionally, being intentional and aligning ourselves with the principles of the kingdom of heaven so that we can bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. Like we've said, like we've been talking about, Jesus is about dismantling religion. So let's jump to Mark chapter 7. And it says, one day the Pharisees and teachers of religious law arrived from Jerusalem to see Jesus, and they noticed that some of his disciples failed to follow the Jewish ritual of hand washing before eating. The Jews, especially the Pharisees, they did not eat until they had poured water over their cupped hands as required by their ancient tradition. This was but one of many traditions that they clung to. So the Pharisees and the teachers of the religious law, they said to him, why don't your disciples follow our age-old tradition? They eat without first performing the hand-washing ceremony. And Jesus replied with his favorite nickname for these dudes, you hypocrites. Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you, for he wrote, and I'm going to read this in the Message translation because I think it really hits home. It says, these people make a big show of saying the right thing, but their heart isn't in it. They act like they're worshiping me, but they don't mean it. They just use me as a cover for teaching whatever suits their fancy, ditching God's command and taking up the latest fads. And then Jesus said, you skillfully sidestep God's law in order to hold on to your own tradition. What a gut punch. Clinging to your own tradition, your own ways, the things that make you feel superior, clinging to the way that this is how we do it because this is always how it's been done. But Jesus brings it back to our hearts. Then Jesus called the crowd together and said, listen and try to understand. It's not what goes into your body that defiles you. You are defiled by what comes from your heart. And I love how this chapter is laid out. Jesus challenges the status quo and tradition of the Pharisees. He teaches a lesson that it's about our heart. But Jesus' disciples still don't get it. They come to him and they say, hey, Jesus, we don't get it. Can you put it in plain language? And this is from the Message version. So can you put it in plain language? And Jesus said, are you being willfully stupid? Now, Jesus might not talk to you like that, but sometimes Jesus just face palms right at me and is like, Nicole, are you being willfully stupid? And sometimes, yes, I am. But the disciples aren't getting it with the lesson and the words alone. So then comes the real life object lessons. In verse 25, a woman who had heard about him came to Jesus and fell at his feet. Her daughter was possessed by an evil spirit, and she begged him to cast out the demon. But she was a Gentile. And so Jesus told her, first, I should feed the children, my own family, the Jews. It isn't right to take food from the children and throw it to the dog. Jesus calls this woman a dog after telling her, I'm not going to help you because I'm not here for you. So she said, that's true, Lord, but even dogs under the table are allowed to eat the scrap from the children's plates. He said, good answer. Now go home, for the demon has left your daughter. And when she got home, she found her lying quietly in bed, and the demon was gone. And then a deaf man with a speech impediment was brought to him, and people begged Jesus to lay hands on him and heal him. And so Jesus put his fingers in the man's ears, then spitting on his own fingers, he touched the man's tongue. Clean hands be damned, am I right? Like the two grossest, dirtiest, germ-filled places on the human head. And Jesus is like, Jesus looked up to heaven and said, be open. And instantly the man could hear perfectly, and his tongue was freed, and he could speak plainly. This is human traditions versus true religion. And we know that true religion from James 1:27 means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. Jesus flips man-made traditions on his head when he interacts with these two individuals, widows and orphans. He's holding up the law and saying, you have heard it said. He even says it to this Gentile woman. And the law would have actually prohibited and protected Jesus from having anything to do with these two individuals. A Gentile woman, the fact that she was Gentile already meant that she was impure and unholy based off of her race and her religion and her country of origin. So Jesus had a fair pass to ignore her. What he said was actually accurate. I cannot take what's for the Jews and give it to you because you are an impure, unclean, Gentile woman. And the deaf man, if a person was blind or deaf or lived with disabilities, it was thought it was punishment for either their sin or the sin of their ancestors, which right off the bat made them impure and unclean. And so then they were forced to live a segregated life away from the community. Isn't that messed up, putting blind people out to pasture? Like, good luck. Jesus engaging with these people, this man, this deaf man, this widowed woman, this Gentile woman, shows us that he is in the business of deconstructing religious and societal norms. This is part of Jesus' overall ministry of him continually challenging and dismantling systemic issues of exclusion and injustice, teaching us that deconstruction is not only necessary to our life, but it is never ending. It's a lifelong commitment for those of us who follow Jesus. Our commitment to Jesus demands that we continue to reflect, to learn, to explore and to confront the systemic injustices in our society, in our churches, in our cities, in our states, in our country. Holding everything we do, say, believe, feel, and think up to the mirror of, I have heard it said, I have done it this way, I have voted this way, I have believed this way because this is how I've always done it. And then saying, but what does Jesus say? Is this about love and justice and mercy and compassion? It's not enough to simply go through the process of deconstruction and to leave things dismantled. We have to do the work. We have to, in our exploring and restoring of our faith and in our self-reflection, we have to be willing to admit when we get it wrong. As I said before, I'm guilty of having tunnel vision for the LGBTQ community. And wanting to advocate for this marginalized community is not, like I said, inherently bad. But when it starts to lead to the exclusion of other marginalized groups, no matter how unintentional it may be, that's when it calls for and demands a reevaluation and a restoration of my way of thinking, my way of believing, and my way of behaving in the world, my way of teaching as a pastor, my way of leading as a pastor. I have to be okay with admitting when I get it wrong. And I've been challenged in this, hence why I'm revisiting this conversation of deconstruction. And in this series that I'm going to stretch over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about what this means for us individually, what this means for us moving forward as individuals and believers of Christ, but also what it means for us as a church, as a body of believers, and as a community. What we see in Mark 7 and in the Barbie movie is an awakening, a deconstruction and a transformation. Barbie's realization that Barbie Land isn't as perfect as she thought it was is just a mere echo of the encounter Jesus has with the Gentile woman and the deaf man. It's about challenging the status quo, challenging the way things are, no matter how seemingly perfect they are. It's about confronting systemic issues that hinder healing, that hinder inclusivity, that hinder love. I'm guilty of teaching and preaching from my own experience. But in that, I've missed the experience of others. I've inadvertently ignored the experience, the lived experience of other people. And in that, I have missed giving them what they need to feed their souls. The song we're closing with tonight is one of my favorites. It says, "From the head to the heart, you take me on a journey." And like I've been speaking tonight, deconstruction is a never-ending journey. Not about dismantling our faith and dismantling religious practices and leave it there and walk it away, but a journey and about questioning how we can rebuild our faith, how we can rebuild our community in a way that reflects the love and inclusivity and mercy and compassion and grace and healing that Jesus has on offer to all people. Not just about what we believe, but how we live it out, how we take it beyond these walls and we do something to make a difference to all people. A few weeks ago, I took Jesus' analogy of putting new wine into an old wineskin that's just going to break under the pressure. And when I said that, I mentioned that I believe that Refuge has a new wine. Refuge has something new on offer for this community, for Southwest Florida. And so the question is, are we trying to put a new wine of love, inclusivity, diversity, and healing into a wineskin that is going to break under the pressure? Or are we doing things as individuals and as a community to get this new wine beyond our walls? As the band comes up and we sing the song, more than words and more than good ideas, would you pray? Would you sing? Would you reflect? on how we can find his love in the open fields, how we can bring this new wine of love, justice, mercy, inclusivity, grace, healing, hope, and peace to all people, gay, straight, black, white, all people, homeless people, refugees, people who need help, people who need compassion and love and support, all people. As we sing this song, would you pray that our board, our leadership team, our pastors, they have peace and direction about where to take this church, where to take our body, and how we as a family and a body of believers take this journey from our head to our hearts over and over again, continually reevaluating and growing and learning and doing better, admitting if we're getting it wrong, and do what we need to do to fix it. Do what we need to do to explore and restore our faith in Jesus. Would you stand and worship with us?